Next on our agenda. You
Yeah.
want me to, do you want me to do a?
Sure. Why don't you do a
Okay.
presentation? Yep.
Okay, so, if anybody's been following, one of our neighboring school districts in Claremont has been having some fiscal issues that are extremely dramatic and traumatic for that district. And, there's a lot of vagueness still about the extent of the damage. And this has caused incredible grief in that district, but really throughout New Hampshire. This is something that's really going to reflect on all of us in different ways. And so I asked Ruben to think about now we're going to start in our information sessions really getting into the budget. Now we really focus the budget. And I thought that to talk a little bit about our own financial procedures and audit controls first, to kind of just set the stage for our future budget talks, but also say, this is why, even though from everything that I've been watching on their meetings, on the Claremont meetings, I've been watching their public stations. There's still so much vagueness there, but we do have a great deal of transparency at Jaffrey Ringe, and we do have some safeguards in place that are a little different. And so I wanted Ruben and Carrie to have some time to kind of showcase this. And then as such, we're going to ask that there be no comments during the presentation so that we can have a clean recording for the public and really post this really clearly and just say, look, this is here, and then have all of our questions answered afterwards, which would also be recorded and answers to that. So we just want a clean presentation recording, and then we can ask our full things. So thank you.
So I'll start off with putting this microphone between us. Carrie, I think this is going to be the most exciting presentation this school board has ever had. It is definitely the most technical one. So I do think it's important. And while many of the reasons for the challenges this other school district is having, perhaps we are not going, we're not going to experience those because of our practices and so forth, and our history and our longevity with people being in the same position for a period of time. And we'll talk a little bit about some details as we navigate this presentation. There are things that they've dealt with or that they're dealing with this or going to have to deal with this year that we too have to deal with, and it's important to talk about. So we've entitled this the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District Financial Procedures and Controls. We'll talk about a little bit about the annual audit that we have, the purpose of the annual audit, review of financial audit reports. We're going to, for people who are watching tonight or will watch it later on, we'll be able to show individuals how to navigate the website to get to the information that they need to in order to learn more and spend a lot more time with our numbers, with our practices, with the information that comes to us from Plotzik and Sanderson, the audit firm. We'll talk about our checks and balances, what we put in place to make sure that we are both transparent, but also that we are very careful with the funds that our taxpayers provide to us for the running of these schools. Federal funds, that's a significant piece to all of this conversation. How do we handle our federal funds? And what does that all mean relative to cash flow? And of course, our budget process, and then we'll have time for questions. So some of this is up there. We won't read everything, but I did highlight some key aspects of this to talk about. And so we have annual audits in our school district. Every year since I've been here, and I'm sure well before that, we have had, I believe, actually, Plotzik and Sanderson has been the firm, and they are the firm that did the audits of the last couple places that I was in as well. So they're very experienced in working with New Hampshire public schools. Audits provide independent assurance that financial information is reliable. That's important. We are not doing, well, let me correct that. We do audit ourselves quite often informally. It's important for an organization to have an outside independent audit a firm come in and do that so that we can be more assured or rest assured that we are doing the right things. Or if we're finding something like a challenge, they're letting us know what we could be doing better. So audits provide independent assurance that financial information is reliable, ensuring government operations are transparent, accountable, and run efficiently and ethically. Is there anything, Carrie, that you'd like to add to the purpose of the annual audit? Because this is your fun time of the year, every year. Do not bother Carrie during audit.
The only thing I guess I'd like to add is that we have a lot of internal controls in place, and we'll go through that in the next couple of slides to talk about how, what we have in place to help mitigate fraud. Some of that is also the purpose of the audit, and reviewing our controls. So the auditors will come in and go through our controls. They'll spend at least 2 days in the district, usually at the beginning of August, reviewing our controls. Then they come out for the full field audit at the end of August.
For the people who are going to watch this later on, or maybe it's a question that might come up, what do we mean by controls? What's another way of putting it?
It's methods that we have in place to ensure that we're following our school board policies, and we're also ensuring that there are multiple layers. So we'll go into that on another slide too. We talk about segregation of duties. So we're making sure that what we're doing has different levels and different people seeing it, so that not one person can do the entirety of a function and possibly mismanage something.
Yeah, and that's their number one question when they come in for me is to talk about fraudulent possibilities. Is there any possibility of that happening? I mean, it comes around to controls.
Correct.
So the review of financial audits. So let's see if I can click on this. If you go to our website, sau47.org, and then go to departments, down to business, and is it financial reports?
Yes.
We'll go to financial reports.
Then you go to the annual financial audits on the left. Yep.
And you'll see we have all of our audits. The 2025 audit has been done, but they don't have it written up, I don't believe, for
It's
it.
not
But
final.
it's not finalized at this point.
But they have come out. Yeah.
But we have 2024 all the way back to 2014. So we have 10 years of audits here. So that if anyone wants to look at our practices, what the auditors, this independent agency has to say about us and our financial dealings over the last decade, you can look at that and we'll have a new one. And sometimes we have findings. They're not usually major findings, but if we have findings, what are the areas that, well, I guess we'll ask two questions. One, when we have findings, what might be an area that schools would likely have findings on? And then what maybe are a few of the findings that we've had? A lot of the time we don't have findings. We
Right.
are in
So
good order.
In all my years that I've been here, and I've been here for about 16 years, we've never had a major finding. So any finding has been, a minor finding, so it wouldn't impact any ability to borrow. It doesn't, when you have a minor finding, they're saying this is just an area to improve on. There's no impact to the financial statements. So there's nothing that we're doing in that finding that would state that our financials are inaccurate. So an example of a minor finding would be if we received a cash deposit or a check of some kind, and our policy states that we have to make a deposit by Friday, so it can't be held over the weekend, and that deposit isn't made until Monday, that could potentially be a finding. So it's something that small, just that we're not, we missed something, or if there were a couple episodes of that, or maybe last year, say in our student activity accounts that a check wasn't deposited timely within that week, it was deposited the following week, and it happens again, then they might write us up and say that's a finding. And that's typically the areas we've had our findings is with student activity funds. I don't think we've had a finding in any other area except for maybe policy related that needed to be updated.
And so you can see over here that not only do you have the annual financial reports, but you have annual reports and year-to-date revenue reports. Also, if you go to departments and you go down to business right here, come budget season, you'll have access to past and current budget information. And certainly I would encourage anyone to come here and, explore any department, and whether it be the business, human resources, student services, facilities. Right now is a little bit shakier because we've made some changes, but we do have some information there that would be helpful. These are some quotes, and these are typical. This is from 2024. In our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects. I'm going to read it from here. In all material respects, the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District as of June 30th, 2024, and the respective changes in financial position and the respective budgetary comparison for the major general grants and food service funds for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. In our opinion, the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year end June 30th, 2024. And if you were to go to that website and look at other reports, you would find very similar language in all of those reports. And that's a distinction between what we do and what the district that we spoke of earlier tonight, they have. My understanding is that they hadn't had an audit for several years, maybe since the COVID timeframe, and not having regular audits, even if it's just every 2 years. But we do the maximum every year. We think that's important. We think that's responsible. And so that's the importance of having an audit. You need outside entities to come and do what Carrie said, either inform us of any practices that we need to improve, or be able to give us, in a sense, a clean bill of health. Like, you've done great. Keep it up. Keep moving forward. And so if we especially, we've been fortunate in this district. Carrie's been in her position for quite some time. I've been in my position for quite some time. a lot of locations don't have that type of longevity. It's actually very rare that that's the case, especially with the business administration role. It is hard to find people who are going to be in that position, and it's really tough, especially because of you see federal funds, food service, the general budget that we have, and all the laws that keep on changing. It's very difficult in a public school setting to make sure everything's straight all the time. And all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So especially in those types of environments where they have a lot of turnover, you have to have an outside entity checking what you're doing. Checking what you're doing. We internally check what we're doing. So our checks and balances. Would you like to take this one, Carrie?
Sure. So I don't know that it's necessary to go through all of this,
Mhm.
but a key part of internal controls is segregation of duties. As I explained earlier, where one individual is not doing the entirety of a process. So for example, we have separate individuals that process the biweekly payroll. A different person sets up employees. A different person will add bank accounts so that the person setting up the employees can't add bank accounts. And then a different individual creates positions. So that way, one person isn't doing the whole step, and that is to help mitigate fraud. So that one person can't set up a dummy account for themselves and get paid. And then we also have oversight. So the person that's setting up payroll, that's reviewed by a different individual to check it. So there are those types of controls in place. We also have somebody who records cash receipts, and then a different person that creates the bank deposits, and another one that does bank reconciliations. And those are all part of your segregation of duties. That's important to have within an organization to ensure that you're that no one's doing anything that they're not supposed to do. And journal entries, another example, is done by the finance manager, and then I review and approve them. We also have multiple levels of approval for all of our Frevel forms. If we're hiring an employee, we have someone's entering the form, and then it goes to the manager, then it goes to HR, then it goes to the superintendent, and then it comes over to the business office, and then it'll go to the school board as notice on the school board minutes. So all of those types of things, including purchase requisitions, one person enters it, the manager approves it, and then some of them have multiple levels of approval before they come over to the business office. And none of them are processed unless all of the documentation is attached to those requisitions for whatever it is we're purchasing, because our school board approved purchasing guidelines has different thresholds for different dollar amounts of what we're purchasing on what's required, along with the laws and for grants and everything else. So that's kind of a summary of some of it.
And during the 2020, 21, 22 timeframe, that's when we started to use that. I believe Leslie did give a presentation on Frevo and that system, which is an internal process of basically a form routing process. She writes the code, she puts the documents together. We do a lot of testing with individuals to make sure the workflow goes properly, that we can have the right attachments, et cetera. And if something is not in line, we can, send it back to the individual to make corrections. And so, which is much more efficient than using pencil and paper or pen and paper. So we don't do much of anything actually anymore through paper. And then let me see if I can find the Frevo system here. All bookmarks. Let's go here. I'm not going to go through and show you like a whole routing process, because I would need more than me to do that. But it is important to look at, so our business office forms. We have mileage vouchers, missing inaccurate timesheets, travel reimbursement, vendor contracts, W-9 for vendors, HR forms. We have, this is for signing off on staff handbooks, inter-office forms. You can see superintendent forms, student services forms has a lot of them, onboarding employees. You can see all the forms and all the detail that goes on into making sure that that's a smooth process. And I believe we have some more that I don't have access to, but like, I don't think anyone wants me to create a miscellaneous payment voucher or anything of that nature. They don't like me hiring anyone or touching any of those documents. I don't know why, Larry. But it's not in my forms. So, but it's a good process and one that also at the very end of everything, we have a system called DocStar where these are turned into PDFs and then stored digitally, and they are given a file names for easy access. So if we ever wanted to find something within, as long as we understand what the name is supposed to be, about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, we're able to pull up anything to find. Yeah, yes. Yeah, I believe so. There we go. Federal funds. Revenue offsets expenses. When budgeting federal funds, revenues offset expenses, meaning they net to a $0 tax impact to the voters. Expenses and revenues are budgeted equally. Only actual expenditures are reimbursed as revenue to the school district. Federal funds, whether we actually incur expenses each month using federal funds, or sometimes we don't spend federal funds within a month, let's say Title II or Title I, maybe we'll go a month or two without spending something, they still get reported on. So your office, specifically Leanne, is the one reporting to the Department of Education every single month. And making sure that we're hitting our deadlines. You can see that number 3, monthly expenditure reports are submitted in all of the grant areas to the Department of Education by the 10th of the month. That is what all places are supposed to do. Sometimes I think that does not happen, judging by some of the conversations we have about federal funds with individuals when we have grant conversations online. But we follow this process pretty tightly. Anything you'd want to add about our processing with federal funds?
No, just that, that's what the state looks for us to do, to have it submitted by the 10th of the following month for the prior month, to have our reports submitted to them so that they can keep up with everything. In addition, it's better for us because then we will get reimbursed, hopefully sooner. The districts have to front the money in advance and then get reimbursement from the state afterwards, so that can make cash flow tight. And I know we have a separate slide on that. If we have some larger expenditures that come through, or we're in a particularly tight budget year. But I think part of the reason for putting this slide up is I believe that there were some conversation about that other district that may have received some grant money and or actually was supposed to receive grant money and incurred the expenses but never submitted to get reimbursed. So it's very, very important to make sure that you're submitting for those reimbursements, because there are deadlines with grants, and if you don't get the report submitted when the grants close, then you've now incurred those costs without getting the revenue that you had expected. And you haven't raised and appropriated the money through taxation for those expenditures.
And so during the time of COVID, when we had the 2 or 3 rounds of ESSER funds, that was millions of dollars. So we had, was a job and a half just to, manage those funds and do everything we needed to do with those. We, especially because we did a construction project with our ESSER funds, we added in both the elementary schools and in part to this building as well, HVAC units, HVAC systems that needed to be done. We had a mindset of taking ESSER funds and spending them in a way that was going to benefit the whole community as best we could. And so we did that, but there were a lot more rules and regulations when you're talking about using federal funds to do any construction. So that was quite challenging, but we were able to get all of our money back, which was great, and save millions save the community millions of dollars by doing it at that point in time before prices went in another direction. And the direction wasn't down. But you mentioned at the very end, cash flow. And we would suspect that that would be a challenge for the district that you were talking about over in Claremont.
Correct. So, if you have any budget constraints, or you're in a particularly tight budget year, or if you have inaccurate financials, it can create a cash flow issue, as I just brought up. If you have spent money that you expect to get reimbursed for from a grant, and then you don't submit for the reimbursement, now you've incurred all of these expenses that weren't, and you didn't budget, you didn't get the revenue that you had budgeted for. And I just wanted to bring up an example. In the fiscal year 21-22 year, we had payments to, as Ruben mentioned, an HVAC, to a vendor for the HVAC project. And we did have to hold payments towards the end of that fiscal year to that vendor of about $550,000, because we needed to make payroll. So that was a particularly tight year. So we had no financial mismanagement. However, we had a very tight budget. It was also a year we used about $400,000 in the retainage fund for the parking lot work. So we had incurred those expenses as well. So it's just some of the expenses we had to send to this vendor were between $500,000 and $8,000 at a time, and then we're waiting to get reimbursed. So that's cash that comes out of our account that we've got to manage to make sure that we have cash to pay for other things until we get reimbursed.
How this, I guess a question, and we didn't have this, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot with this question, but I know that you and I look at our finances every single week. And we certainly this past year looked at them very tightly, and in the spring, and then since we started this year as well. We had a challenging budget season and had to make some changes, had to make some cuts. We also, the board approved the spending of some funds in order to retain some programming for the year. Where are we at? And how are we with our cash flow? What has the impact been? If there, I mean, it's early, right? We've been in just a little over a week in school, but nonetheless, I've signed off on manifests and we've spent.
Right. So at this point in time, we have about 2.2 million of funds that haven't been encumbered yet. So I would say that that's our budget balance. So those are our actual expenditures plus anything we've encumbered. So our budget balance is about 2.2 million. We're usually not at that point until around December or January in a year. So we are hitting that point earlier. That doesn't include any substitutes or any co-curriculars, except for maybe the few ones from the fall that have been put in place for stipends for those individuals. And that 2.2 includes the roughly 2 million or 1.1 million that the board authorized to use for the retainage fund. So if we didn't have the retainage fund, it would be that much less in our budget balance at this point in time. So we're looking at, I mean, if you want to consider the athletics and co-curriculars plus any substitute costs, that's probably going to be about, $450,000 to $500,000 through the end of the year that you would take off of that figure I just gave you, just for when you're looking at what we did last year for those expenses. And then plus, of course, we haven't had the winter yet, so we haven't spent any money for staff to come in after hours for cleaning, snow or removal, and a lot of repair and maintenance that just happens to the buildings throughout the year. I mean, you don't encumber everything at the beginning of the year. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that was good. It's nice. So. The budget process. Do you want to take this one right here, just briefly?
This is just a short synopsis for people that want to look at the slide after or watch the video. That I think it gets confusing when we do our budget process, because a lot of people want to count the revenues that we get and, hey, we'll donate this or we'll donate that for revenue, but you budget your gross budget inclusive. So you don't even consider your revenue. You're budgeting what all of your expenses are gonna come up to. So you're not budgeting the net budget. The net budget would be your expenses less any revenues you expect to gain. So when you're looking at warrant article number 2, or it's typically warrant article number 2, unless we have a bond, your operating budget is going to include what you expect to spend for your general fund, your food service fund, and your grant revenues. And then you minus out any revenues that you expect to get, what the tax impact would be, because that's what you're raising and appropriating. But you're budgeting the full gross budget on that warrant article. So when we go into a year and we're spending money, we're not allowed to spend more than what the voters have approved us to spend, unless we have qualifying unanticipated revenue and we've received approval to accept unanticipated revenue. That would be really the only exception. Or trust funds, but those are kind of those are outside of what you put on the warrant article.
And so if we look back at all of this conversation tonight with the audits, with our controls, I mean, the audit kind of guides or kind of summarizes everything that we are doing and lets us know if we can do some things better. You mentioned this in this last slide that the gross budget, the budget is usually Article 2 unless we have a bond, which would go before that. And I was just thinking about, when we have this conversation a lot, the importance of having really strong or really clean audits for the purposes of being able to borrow. Can you just talk a little bit about our school districts spending or borrowing power, or
Yes.
anything that has to do with that?
If we were going to go out for a bond, we would be, incurring long-term debt. In order to do that, you need to retain bond counsel. So you need to get a legal firm that can prepare a bond and a legal opinion that tells the bonding agency. So we'll use New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, because that's where we typically would get our bonds. They would express a legal opinion to the bond bank stating whether or not they were confident in our ability to pay back that loan. And in order to receive that positive opinion, there's an extensive amount of documentation they need. But one of the most important pieces is your most recent financial audits. And if you can't prove that you have good audits, that your audits have been clean, then they may not give you a clean legal opinion, and then you wouldn't be able to borrow for the long-term debt for whatever project we were looking to do.
Mhm.
Did that explain it?
I think so. And I think it can affect rates, correct? Is that true, or maybe not?
Not typically. Usually that's based on the term, when you're talking about bonds.
Mhm.
but it could be for something else, different
Right.
type of borrowing.
Thank you. So we're at the end of what we've prepared relative to this topic. What questions might you have or comments?
Carrie, I had a couple. Do you have positive pay?
Yes, we do.
And do we do any investing?
I'm sorry, do we do what?
Do we do any investing?
We
funds?
have something that's set up that we're authorized to use. Yes, we provide to the auditors for that as well. Yeah.
Do we
So
have an
there's,
investment policy?
we do, and the board approves it every year.
Okay,
And that actually needs to go on an agenda. So thank you.
Yeah.
For that to approve again.
Couldn't we save money by having less qualified business? Sorry, I'm just kidding. Actually, I was thinking the opposite. When it comes to so many of the things that you just covered, it seems that the idea that you and the superintendent look at our finances every week is a tremendous strength to our district, and allows us not only to avoid the kinds of things that have happened in a neighboring district, but also to apply for grants and go after funds that other districts really don't have the capacity for. I did have a question though. Based on our decisions on August 4th to include the contingency money in our budget, will there be a new budget posted on our business page? And if so, when would that happen?
So typically I would not, because that doesn't change what you reported to the state. So you would not change the reports, your official documentation that was sent to the state. That usage of the retainage money didn't actually change our budget. It's allowing us to spend the money, but our budget is what was approved by the voters.
So the budget, I guess, was cut from 33 million proposed to 30 million and something. So that's
Roughly,
what
yeah.
has been.
So what I do, I have to do something internal to adjust the budget to allow the expenditures to even take place. Our system is set up so that if there isn't any money in a line that's non-salary or benefit related, that requisition can't even be entered. So I have to make a one-sided budget adjustment just to allow it for the year, but I have to back it out because at the end of the year, I have to back it out because your budget needs to match what the voters approved when you're doing all of your final financial documentation. We just provide the minutes and the support to justify and show why we were allowed to spend the money because we went through the procedures in place to have the public hearing and the school board voted. So the auditors have provided all of that to support our expenditures for the year.
Okay, so in looking at the budget documents, that maybe I'm just missing them, but I see our default budget, which of course wasn't approved because we had an amended budget approved.
Mhm.
I see the proposed budget and the default budget, but I don't see the amended budget. Where would I find that? In other words, the budget after the voter approval.
We don't usually provide all of those documentations until we go into budget season. So then I would prepare documents that show what this year's adopted budget is, and that would be all of your voter approved appropriations included. So any additional warrant articles that the voters approved. So that's typically when I put all of that together.
The 400,000 for facilities and the 50,000 for special education, all that gets added in. But that's presented
For the trust
budget
funds.
season.
Typically, yes, it's part of the documentation when we're comparing what this year's budget is to what we're proposing for next year.
Okay, how much does the state give us per student? As, you know, towards their tuition, like, do we get 7,500 per student or, because I'm looking at it, looks like it's 30,000 per student if you divide the $30 million budget by the 1,000 students, then how much does it cost us to educate one student? Like, what's our cost per student?
Do you want to, so are you talking about cost per pupil?
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there are two questions there. So one's cost per pupil, which is where there's a formula that the state
State.
uses
Yeah.
annually. And then there's adequacy. And I believe adequacy is at $4,900 per, I think it's 49.
I think it is too.
And then I think there's some extra funds if you are low income, Title I, or
English as a second.
English as a
language.
second language, and also if you have an IEP.
Okay.
So there are some funds that are provided, but it's in the realm of between 49 and 5,500, 5,600 around there.
Okay, so when you're doing the calculation,
Mhm.
that is part of our $30 million budget. It includes what we get from the state. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so it's approximately 30,000 per pupil to,
If you divided the whole.
The whole
by
budget by
the
the number of
number,
students.
yeah, that's not how the state determines cost per pupil.
right,
But
but I know.
that's one way of.
As a
of looking at it.
taxpayer, you'd be like, okay, how much,
Yeah.
if we were to trade up and,
Mhm.
send the kid to another district or they go, to Lionheart or something like that. Okay, and how does that compare to other districts? Are we pretty much in the middle?
The lower 25th percentile.
Good, okay.
Yeah, our high school actually is we might actually now be the lowest.
Nice.
It depends. I mean, it depends on how you look at it.
Well, it's good to be
Um,
thrifty and I do appreciate how attentive you are to everything.
But I think, I think if you look at the fact that, for instance, the high school probably this year, they were what, third from the last in spending last year. So we'll find out this year around budget season where we're at. But, in that process, getting the School of Excellence, getting a 9 out of 10 best schools rating for their, which is used for real estate. And I think they're, in the upper quartile or third within the US News and World Report this year. So we're not in the top 10, of those, but we're in the, upper third. So if you think we're spending about the least and we're achieving there, we're doing well in many ways. There are some metrics that we can do better in. And so we have to continue to work in those areas.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, and those are primarily around like our last meeting, our state assessment results. Yep.
Can I just do a follow-up question on
Mhm.
the question that Judy asked, which I think so many people ask about, we know what our student population is and we look at our budget and, inevitably you want to divide the one into the other.
Mhm.
But the state doesn't do it that way, and the state has, I presume, sound reasons. And I know we've talked about this, it's a little bit complicated. I think it's transportation, is that one of the things that they don't take into account because different districts have different transportation needs, or what can you tell us about that, Carrie? Why is it, so unintuitive?
Yeah, it is a formula that the state uses, and I don't know if I can pull it up at my fingertips that readily, that talks about, let me see if I have it. mm,
So the
just
cost
give it
per
a name.
pupil represents current expenditures less tuition and transportation costs. That's the one you're looking for.
That's right, generally it, so.
There you go.
So it's current expenditures, less local food service revenue, less transportation, less supplemental expenditures. And then you divide your average daily membership and attendance. So let's see if it has anything else here that would be helpful. So I'm pulling up one that's a couple of years old, but. So back out high school transportation costs minus any transportation property. Back out any tuition, capital expenditures, summer school expenditures. Back out local food service revenue, which is proportional to the high school, all current general fund, special revenue fund, food service fund expenditures. So I'm basically reading from a document that came from the state. There are some videos that the state has put out to help explain cost per pupil. What I can do is if I'm allowed to share it, I can maybe post it on the website on the budgeting page. That way people can link on it and get a better explanation coming from the state.
Yeah, good.
Hey, did you say that capital expenditures are not included?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be a significant factor.
And our cost per pupil last year, I believe, was around 19,000 and some change. I think Keene School District was about 100 or a couple hundred less per pupil than we are. They have many more individuals, many more students in that system. I guess, I don't know if it's Keene or I think it's just Keene, not SA 29. And I think Messinic and this school district hover very closely together.
The New Hampshire average, according to education, NewHampshire.gov, New Hampshire average for the end of 2024 was 21,545. Our average last year, 20,655.
Yeah.
So that's including the preschool.
Thank you.
Barry,
Yes.
been listening to your presentation and thank you so much for taking the time to put this together and for being here this evening. I appreciate it. Am I correct in hearing that an audit is the state of New Hampshire does not require an audit? Is there?
I don't know how accurate that is. I do know that I have to complete a report to the Department of Revenue every year stating when we're going to be able to provide the audit. We have to give it to them. And up until this year, there was a governmental threshold for your grants that if you spent more than 750,000, you had to have what was called a single audit. And we exceed that threshold every year. It's going to increase to $1 million for this fiscal year. If you don't spend more than $1 million, then you don't have to have it. So that is part of the overall audit, is they do that single audit in addition to the overall audit. I also have to submit the annual audits to the bond bank. Now, since we're paying a bond, every year I have to provide them the audit. So I did pull up the RSA and I'm unclear what the actual regulation is surrounding it. I do know that you can elect internal audits, but I think your population in the area towns has to be under a certain threshold in order to do that. So I'm sorry, we could get probably legal advice on that. I have to provide it to different entities every year.
Obviously, there's huge benefits to having these audits done, and I
Yes.
appreciate the incredible amount of work that you and your office do to get that prepared. I do have another question though. It was a few years ago that I believe one of our local school districts, what we're reacting to right now is problems that a school district had. Basically, we believe because of internal problems, but I remember a few years ago, there was a local school district that had, I guess, external fraud, right? Do you remember that? There was somebody answered the phone, it's like they responded to a spam call basically and sent out money. it may have been my first year in the school board.
Yeah.
I'm sure you want to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it the
Yeah.
town or the?
It was town.
It was the
It
town.
was Peterborough, the town.
Yeah, they were paying
Yeah.
for the bridge and stuff with.
And
sending their
we
frauds.
have processes in place to prevent that from
Positive
happening as
pay.
well. I know that's a whole
Yes.
nother.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have
with-
positive pay, so in positive pay, if somebody tries to. We have a vendor list that the bank knows, and if somebody comes in that's not in this vendor list, they don't pay it. Unless they check with Carrie or for the town, they check with me and say, is this right?
Okay,
And we have to approve it.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I asked her if she had it.
Yep.
Because the town has had a couple of incidents where people have tried to cash checks. You know, a $10,000 check from some guy in San Diego, like what would he have a $10,000 check from the town for? The bank says, we don't know this guy's not on your list, and I say, yeah, no. Wait,
Thank you.
Right, so we also have internal controls in place too, so a vendor can't just send us change documentation, say that they want to change the bank routing number that they use. We actually will pick up the phone and call the number we have on our file, not wherever that
Mhm.
change came from, to verify whether or not that's legitimate. In addition, if somebody wants to change their direct deposit for payroll, we make them physically come in with the change form, and we have two people review it to make sure that it's actually valid.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mhm.
Carrie is spot on. The treasurer of Jaffrey approves.
Ruben, I'm curious how the Claremont district, I guess, was able to fail to produce audit reports for 3 years in a row and yet still operate it. How could that happen?
I don't know, and I don't know, I haven't spoken with the district, but I can imagine that what took place. I can imagine that what could have possibly taken place, especially when you have turnover at the central office. And especially if an issue was came up where there was some spending due to receiving of federal funds, and then maybe that was not reimbursed. And if you got behind by 2, 3, I mean, we had how many millions did we must have had upwards of 4 million or something during that time frame.
Yeah.
That district would have had more. So $4 to $5 million. Let's say none of it was acquired again for whatever reason. I don't, or even if 2 million. If you got to that spot and you had to, like you said, you had to pay up front out of your budget, and you're going to lose cash flow and everything like that, you might end up potentially, let's say in a hypothetical situation, a business administrator says, I think I'm moving on. And someone else comes in and goes, ooh, we've got an issue. Well, we've got to pay these bills, and they're paying their last year's bills out of the current year's funds and saying, I hope we're going to be able to kind of even it out at the end, but maybe it doesn't happen. And that pattern carries on for a couple of years. I can see being in really rough shape. So that's just me imagining what could take
What
place.
could have happened?
Yeah. So I'm constantly trying to spend money the following year and carry. No, that's not true. I am the more creative budgeter out of the two of us. But Carrie has this kind of has this little, we joke around about it, kind of, that Ghostbusters symbol, like everybody comes in creative, and she has creativity, budgeting with a little cross canceled out of that. No creativity.
Yeah, I have a couple comments and a specific question I think that maybe will apply to this budget season. I think, first off, I echo what Christine said. Thank you for coming and explaining this. I think it's important for us to hear, and certainly the people that are able to watch. I guess one thing that I've come to appreciate over the last couple of years is how kind of unique and dynamic like school budgeting is. I came in thinking maybe I knew, about budgeting and how to handle it, but there's a lot about what you do and what your people do that is completely different for anything in the corporate world that relies on, statutes, and these things can change a lot. So I just think it's important for people to understand that it's a unique job that not anybody can do. And I've seen the benefit, I guess, that having an experienced person in that position has. So I definitely appreciate that. And I know I've probably come in and had you explain a million things to me in the first few years, and I don't do that as much anymore because I'm confident that everything is going according to plan. Another thing, when we talk about these, redundancies and controls that we have in the process, I think it's important for us as board members and for people at home watching to understand how important this is. As we approach budget season, we're constantly under pressure to reduce, especially, administrative staff. What do we have all this administrative staff for? They're not dealing with students directly, right? These people are not people that deal with students directly, but it is an important job, and it's a huge risk mitigation for the district to enable the district to function, right? We have a $30 million plus district. It can't be run by one person. Simply that one person can't do all the work, and then there's reason to have those redundancies. And all those people are extremely busy. It's not like they're all standing in a line doing things. They all have unique jobs. So I think it's important for people to appreciate that part of it. Well, certainly it doesn't guarantee that something like that can't happen. I don't think that anyone on this board is, lying awake at night. I wasn't when I heard that in Claremont. My initial thought was like, I'm glad that we've had people there for so long that know their job, that know the history of the district. I didn't lose a minute of sleep about that. So definitely appreciate that. Now I have a question. One thing that came up certainly during this last budget season and is likely to come up again, and I don't think I understand completely, is like this donations, right? Remember, people were saying, well, what if, we'll take that 1.1 million, right? And what if we just received a donation for that? What if there was an outside group or group of groups that said, we've raised the money, we want to pay for that next year, or any sort of portion of that? I guess, how would that work in relation to like this budget season? Like, when would we need to know? What would the process need to be? And I'm talking about for next year. Is there anything specific? You don't need to answer now, but I think it's a question that will come up.
Yeah, for accepting donations. Well,
Yeah, for next year, right? Let's say that hypothetical situation, say, I'm going to pay for athletics next year.
right. So when you're budgeting your revenues, typically you're trying to budget. I mean, you're trying to be accurate as possible, but you're also trying to be conservative, because if you budget your revenues too high and you don't receive the money, now you haven't raised and appropriated enough to pay for your expenditures. So the board has the ability to accept unanticipated revenue, but it has to be something that is not anticipated. So I would be hesitant to budget donations just because you don't know what you're going to get. And if you're going to get donations, I think the best thing would be to use it for projects, not for what should be in our normal operating budget. And then there was a question that legal counsel had brought up when we were having the discussions with him during this process, when some people brought up donations, and there was he brought up was it the free and appropriate child education, that if we started the whole I'm sorry, I went into
Pay to play.
pay to play. Never mind, that wasn't what you asked me.
Okay.
So that was a different issue.
Mhm.
But we can talk about it more in the budget season. but-
Yeah, I think it would be important for everyone to understand how that works, just if there's certain deadlines and what sort of, guarantees would we need, even as a board, if there's something that the board would need to do.
Well, I mean, you had mentioned that if you are gonna budget the revenue, you gotta budget the expenditure. And so if we are saying, for instance, let's say, oh, yeah, someone's gonna pay for athletics, so that we're gonna get some sort of revenue for athletics. Well, we're gonna have to raise, we're gonna have to put that in for the expenditure. And then we better, if we're not budgeting for it within, and asking it to come through taxation, better hope that that comes through.
Right, you
Yeah.
still have to budget the expense.
Right.
Because you have to be given the authority to spend the money. And then the revenue would just reduce the tax impact.
Okay, yeah, I think I understand. Yeah, and I think we should.
It would have to be a
continue
reliable,
discuss it.
very
Right.
reliable source. Like,
That's
for
what we-
instance, an example would be our student services, our special education aid. There's some level of reliability, although lately it hasn't been as good, but hopefully it will rebound. But there is, they give us kind of a range, and that range is at least backed up by law, that they have to give us something. So there's some reliability when we budget for that.
Right, and then the revenues are finalized in the fall. And that typically happens, so I already had to submit the revenue report to the Department of Revenue Administration, and they typically reach out to me in October to actually go through the report and to make any adjustments to like special aid. Special education aid. And even at that point in time, we usually don't know what the final number is. So we're budgeting a percentage of what we think we're gonna get. Because if we budget the full amount and then we don't get it, now have a revenue shortfall.
So in this case, the case that I'm talking about, would the donation need to be made in the fiscal year? Let's say I had $1 million and I wanted to donate it. I'm just gonna lay out a process here. Maybe I write a letter of intent to the board saying, hey, I have this. I would like to donate it for this purpose. Would I need to wait until the next fiscal year to actually donate it? Or could it be donated right away and then used next year? I know I'm getting too specific. We can get
Yeah.
into this later.
It can't be used the following year. No, it would get returned to taxpayers if there was,
So it needs to be
excess.
donated in the fiscal year that it's intended to be used.
yes.
I won't ask you more questions now.
You got my brain going, but I'll wait for that other presentation to ask those questions too.
And this is a hard one for me because I think it's great if we can do some of this, but I think, it enables this. It doesn't address the root of the problem, which is in Concord, right? It's like, oh, now we can raise money. I mean, in my opinion, we should be getting more money from the state and not having to do this, but I don't see that coming. So
Right.
I think we
I
need
mean,
to.
Judy mentioned the number 7,500. Did you get that from the papers? Because that's what the court.
Yeah,
Ruling
I
had
think that's
been
what
a
they're
little bit
supposed to
over that,
up
I
us
think.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's not gonna
Yeah,
happen.
exactly.
So, I mean, I think we
Yeah.
face reality and do some of this
Right.
possible.
Charlie, do you have any questions?
Not really, I just have a comment. It's my understanding that our tax-based revenue is collected by the towns twice a year. When they send out their tax bills and they collect it. But you negotiate with the towns and the towns agree to a payment schedule to pay to fund the school district so much per month. And that usually is a fixed amount. In other words, $800,000 a month or something like that. Yet our expenses are like this. Some months we have bills due and we have extreme expenses, other months fewer expenses. How do you manage the cash flow to handle that kind of a situation where the towns are going to give you so much per month, but the spending is not going to be that way?
Well, that's actually a really good question, and that comes into trying not to budget too tightly, because if you do, then you run into potential cash flow issues. We haven't had that problem except for that year since I've been doing it that I brought up in the presentation. But I'm looking at that all the time on a regular basis. Over the summer, we get some money through the appropriation or the assessments to the town, and our school year staff hasn't come back yet. So we have a chance in July and August to get our cash a little bit higher so that when we start paying that payroll, we have enough in the bank account in order to make that payroll starting in September when everybody's getting paid again. So but it's something that I look at on a regular basis.
You
So
must have gone through the entire year and said, these are the major hitters, this is when I'm gonna hit, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot of work. And a lot of magic.
Yeah.
But you're checking it all the time to make sure that you have enough to cut your, your purchasing expenditures every week, your accounts payable invoices and your payroll. So payroll is first and foremost that you have to make. And then if you hold your accounts payable invoices, you do, but hopefully you don't have to because you don't want vendors getting mad and then not doing any business with you.
I'll close up with, to go back to your mention, Christine, if you listen to the, Claremont channel to their school board meetings, there's a lot of information there that was really helpful, that kind of elucidated some things here as well. One of the things is that, I don't know if it was a representative there, but as a member of their public is introducing legislation, planning to make, annual audits of schools mandatory. So no, it's not apparently something that's now, but hopefully in the future. In line with that, do you have an idea how much it actually costs us to pay project? I won't butcher the name.
Lozic Sanderson, yeah.
Yep, well done. I know you've been saying it for years. So what does that cost?
Yeah, so it's, this year, I think was about 22,500, I think. Or 22,000, it was one of the two.
Well, we're budgeting for. And my last question is, what can we expect time-wise? Do you have an idea for this budget season? I know we were, like, I looked last year, we really didn't get a formal calendar until like mid-October, but do you have an idea of when things really are starting to, and clearly they're always in the works.
Yeah.
But when we can start seeing some information on our side.
Yep, so I did prepare a draft budget calendar that I've shared with Ruben, so we're looking at probably adding a date to that, and then we're discussing how we're going to do it internally with the department heads. So do you want to have that for the next meeting, Ruben? I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can put it forth in the next meeting. We're gonna be, already started the conversations at a very low level with the department heads or the principals, the schools, and so we'll have to figure out the best way to do it with the board structure that we have right now. It will have to be started, we'll have to start it earlier. Yep.
And then I've got another couple of quick questions, I think. But also, just a comment about the grant funding that Claremont apparently lost because they didn't, well, it sounds like they had applied for grants, but didn't complete all the required steps to actually earn the revenue.
A lot of
And that was
steps.
something that they learned too
It's a lot
late.
of steps.
Yeah. But I compare that to the multi-tiered systems of support grant that this district was able to win this past year. I think it was $2.5 million over 5 years. Is that the amount?
Oh, one and a quarter.
One
So
and a quarter.
half of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, still 1.25 is.
Claremont actually was one of those as well. We worked with them on that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Well, I hope they got those monies.
Yeah, I hope so.
But in order to do that, you have to apply, and your application has to be complete.
Mhm.
And it has to contain good information, and you have to follow up, so. When
We had, in that particular one, we had been very good partners with the Department of Education in some prior dealings, some prior grant activity that they had run, and so we were invited to that process because we had followed through because of our structures that we have in place, in part in the business office, and then that same mentality throughout the district. Yeah.
When I hear people ask about, the cost of administration, I get it, nobody wants to see administrative costs high. They'd like to see everything go to the students, but things like that grant, things like the proper management of the ESSER grants, which allow this whole district to get new HVAC systems, right? Half of it through ESSER, half of it through a lease program. I hope people are aware that these things require top-notch people, and they require people who are going to be invested in the community and stay here. And I think of the intensive learning centers and that effort. It's kind of a little different story there, but the educational creativity to create those centers and keep our students here in the district, keep them part of the community, but also save us from out-of-district placements, which cost, well, with transportation,
Yeah,
$180,000 a year. So I mean, those kind of
Yeah.
things are part of why we try to keep the best staff we can. And we're pretty thin in a lot of areas. We've given up our communications position. That saved us money. We've given up right now our facilities director. That saves us money, but they have costs too, because those things you can't do. So then my question is, what level of responsibility should board members take on for being aware of what's in the audit reports and other financial documents? I mean, how critical is that?
I'll give you a couple moments to think. Off the top of my head, I think that this past budget season is an example where we had, I think we had a lot of learning. I'm going to look at it through a positive lens. I think we had a lot of learning that went on this past spring, in different ways. And one thing that we learned was that, I think in the past, a lot had been able to be said in public forums, social media and so forth, that without the school district was very careful not to respond because we have to be careful how we respond. I think the more people who were educated and understood the realities of things or the truth or the other side of the story, were able to be vocal, most of the time in appropriate ways. Sometimes, not necessarily was the case. But I think that from a board standpoint, being able to to be able to know when someone from a community or from another community or an organization or a town employee or something like that makes a statement, especially if they're making a statement in public that is not factual, is not accurate, being able to with grace, but also being firm, be able to say, no, that's not the case, and here's where you can find that information. I think that's important. So knowing it enough where the information is good. And I think this was part of a step to explain where some of that is for people to where they can go see it on the website and also hopefully refer back to this. And certainly, Carrie and I, Carrie more than myself, but I will, hang out, kind of support you, be able to answer any questions that people do have along the way, and hopefully earlier rather than later. It is Chris hit it right on the head of the nail there. Is school district budgeting is very different. We're accountable to a lot of people. We're accountable to each and every child. We're accountable to their families. We're accountable to the taxpayers. We're accountable to the state. We're accountable to the federal government. We're accountable, and we have a lot of regulations that we have to follow, and we have a lot of hoops that we have to jump through as well. And we have to be precise.
And the thing I notice is you have to spend the money before they'll give it to you, which that, you know, at least that looks as though you have to have the receipt that you already paid for, you know, help for some of these programs, and then they'll reimburse you, which, you know, that has got to be very tricky, as Chris had mentioned. So.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
job.
All right.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie, very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you to your staff, please.
I will let them know. Thank you.